how do you frame this discussion, and what would be your apprehension regarding this narrative that China is not doing enough to stop the genocide?
Well, on a fundamental level, I would say that all countries are not doing enough. We are facing a live stream genocide. Children are starving. People are being killed every single day. Journalists are being killed for telling the truth. Parents are being killed for trying to feed their children. Doctors are being killed for trying to save the wounded. And the entire area is in a kind of barbaric medieval siege designed to starve everybody to death, to wipe them out, and now there are further kinetic incursions. So clearly this is a complete and total genocide. And under those situations, we can argue that nobody is doing enough, because this is something that cannot and should not be tolerated. Well, I think it's important to look at the original history. In 1988, China was one of the first countries to recognize the Palestinian state. And for decades before that, it was an ardent and powerful supporter of the PLO, including, supporting them directly in armed struggle. To this day, China has asserted that the Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. As you point out, they brought together the 14 factions of the Palestinian parties. You cannot do anything if the internal politics are fractured. So the first step is actually to bring the different parties together, which China has done. We also know that China has provided support to Iran. We know that Chinese companies have provided support to Yemen. In particular, they're using the Beidou targeting system. So these are not insignificant aid. And we also know that the reason why a lot of people started to understand what the Palestinians were really going through is because of TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese parent company. And this is why the Israelis are forcing TikTok, this is why the US is forcing TikTok to be sold, because they see TikTok as a challenge to their control over the information sphere, but in particular over Taiwan. So I think there are multiple things that China is doing and has been doing and continues to do under different different things are being done. But let's look at also the issue of Qatar. Just recently, Israel bombed the Palestinian leadership negotiating for peace in Qatar. Okay, and we know that the US greenlighted this because there's no way that Israel could have sent weapons platforms into Qatar, which is essentially a US base. It is, a monarchy that is masquerading as a country that is actually a pretext for the largest US base in the era. They are the two evil twins of the Middle East, Israel and Qatar. And they have a nice PR arm. It's called Al Jazeera. And they, lift up the Palestinian issues, but they always focus, as I point out, on the little I, Israel, not the big I, imperialism. And so when Israel bombs Qatar, this is, you can see what the nature of how this setup is. And, what could China have done in that situation? Should it sanction Qatar? Should it sanction the United States? Should it sanction all the other countries that enabled the Israeli attack? These are complex issues. And so the Chinese are trying to navigate carefully in an entire minefield, which is actually being prepared for global war. In fact, I would say that we are already in the first steps of World War III. And as I said, this war is going to go nuclear. Everything that I see in both doctrine and policy says that this is going to go nuclear. And of course, the current genocidaires are the two nuclear-powered rogue states, the United States and Israel. So we can see that, there are tremendous stakes and risks involved. Just to kind of, once again, give the historical context. Genocide is nothing new to the Chinese people. During World War II, or from the Chinese standpoint, the Japanese fascist war of aggression against China, they lost 35 million people. That's 8 to 10% of their population. We saw, it started in 1931, and starting 1931, when they invaded Manchuria, they created a slave state called Manchukuo that was driven and run through slave labor. It was essentially millions of Chinese and Koreans held in slave labor camps and worked to death. And this is what built the Japanese industrial war machine that allowed them to, dominate all of Asia. But even then, why didn't the Chinese liberate all the Chinese held in concentration camps? In the Nanjing massacre, 300 Chinese held in a small city and bombed and slaughtered daily, very similar to what the Palestinians are going through right now. Why didn't the, PLA attack the Japanese? Why didn't they liberate their people? These are people who don't understand the larger picture. It's like people who say, Ho Chi Minh was watching a woman being raped, one of his fellow countrymen being raped in front of his eyes in Saigon. And, you can say, why didn't Ho Chi Minh do anything? Well, he did. He did do something. He got rid of the rapists. These were the colonial policemen that were raping them. And he kicked them out of his entire country. But we have to understand that it's not simply about, we have to see the larger picture. It's not as simple as simply doing a frontal attack and hoping for the best. You have to understand there's a much, much larger and much, much bigger picture with even greater, believe it or not, even greater stakes than what we are seeing right now in Palestine. We can also see, during the Indonesian genocide, when 1 million, 1.5 million communists were killed, who were the first people killed during the Indonesian genocide? They were Chinese, right? It started out as a Chinese genocide. Okay, so China is not new to genocide, and it's not new to trying to resist, this global hegemonic empire, which is genocidal in intent and practice. But the question is, how can you be effective? What is most effective? And that effectiveness falls back to the citizens of the global north to take actions against their own governments who are directly enabling, supplying the genocide. And then also, being aware that we have to support the global south, which is trying to overthrow this genocidal empire. I think that's important to understand.